Welcome to the fish tank.
Hey everybody, Fishman here. This is something I had built for a client last summer, or actually maybe even late last spring. And as in a large number of things that I build and record these days, I just haven't had time to post a video for it. So I thought I'd get around to that now. This client I've had for quite a while, and for part of that time they had kept a few frogs, dwarf African clawed frogs actually, on the front desk, and as kids would come in they would stop and stare, and they really liked the frogs. Now the problem with it was the little tank they had, first off, wasn't designed to keep frogs. It was something that you would probably keep a betta in. It's one of those little cheap tanks that you get, doesn't cost much, and unfortunately it also wasn't very efficient. So it would get dirty really easily, and it would smell, and because, like I said, I had a couple tanks I was taking care of for them, I would clean it out for them. But I only go there every 2-3 weeks, so they're beginning to have difficulties with the health of one of the frogs, and one of them actually ended up passing away. And I got a couple extra for them. And during that time, I said, well, because well, I have a soft spot for kids, so I said, what I'll do is I will make a little frog tank for you. And this frog tank had to have, from my perspective, a couple of important criteria. First off, it had to go 2 or 3 weeks without looking dirty or smelly, and also, of course, keep the frogs nice and healthy. Now, there are a number of ways that you can filter these things, but I wanted to keep it simple. It had to sit on top of a desk after all, and they didn't want, plumbing and wires and all that sort of stuff going all over the place. So what I decided to go with was an undergravel filtration system. Now, again, because it is a tiny little thing, there are only a couple of ways of doing it effectively and still keep the frogs inside the tank, and also allow for gas exchange and that sort of stuff, so that everything will smell nice and the bacteria will grow properly, and all the important stuff that happens in fish tanks. Now, I didn't want to use an air-driven system because well, like I said, this is an office, and lots of bubbling noises and such will probably not be the best of things, so I wanted to keep it nice and quiet as well. So what I'm going to go with here is a small water pump, or, well, power head. It's not really a pump, it's just one of those little teeny ones that pumps or moves a small amount of water, but it should be more than efficient enough for this. You'll notice that the center divider I put in here has a gap at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a grate on the left hand side at this point, made of this material here actually, and what I'm going to do is put a screen on top of that, and then a gravel on top of that, of course, and then when the pump pumps water through that little hole you see there, it will draw water through that gap at the bottom, and this will provide a nice turnover for the aquarium. And when I put a lid on this, I'll just have a lid on the left hand side, and that will give me gas exchange on this little small section on the right. So it should supply me with all the necessities, I think, for keeping these guys healthy and happy, and that way I don't have to clean it too much. So those two little things that you saw on the bottom there, 2 little pieces of acrylic, those are the spacers to keep this egg crate off the bottom. And then what I'm going to do here, as you see here, the pump, you remember in the beginning I was measuring to see the size of it. I drilled a hole there, and then that will, as the water shoots across the top, and you'll see it gets drawn underneath the egg crate, and then that supplies the turnover I need. And as with all undergravel filters, if it does what it should do, there's going to be a fair amount of dirt that's going to collect underneath this filter plate here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach 1/8 inch black acrylic trim around this whole thing, just to hide that lower edge and keep it as neat and clean in appearance as possible between my visits. And again, of course, so I don't have to clean it as much. Now the back end, instead of just doing this trim, I'm going to put on a full sheet to cover the whole section. And the reason why I'm doing that is because where this is going to sit on the desk, there's a window in that direction, and I want to cut down on the amount of direct sunlight it's getting, again for the purpose of just keeping it as clean as possible. One of the reasons I think I took so long to put this video up is the design for this is simple and functional. I put it together out of materials I had laying around the shop. I wasn't too worried about the aesthetics of it. I just wanted to keep two frogs happy and alive. And I think from like I said, from an aesthetic point of view, I could have done a better job. But that's alright, I won't worry about it. I think this tank, and as actually has proven, it is actually very functional, and the frogs and the water itself has been quite clear and clean, and they've been doing quite well since then. Now, what I'm doing here is when I build tanks that need to be watertight, like out of acrylic, I make the bottom just a little bit larger so I can fit the sides completely together, and then I can then use the applicator to apply glue from both sides. That way what happens is I make sure I have a nice watertight seal. And then it is a simple matter to run it through the saw like I am now, set the blade at 1/4 inch, which is the thickness of the acrylic, and then just set the slide stop on the other side there to make sure that it gets at the right length, and then you just slide it through, and then it is flush. This will allow me to put on the final black acrylic trim that's all going to be on that last remaining side. Now what I need to do after this is I need to put on a nice tight lid. African clawed frogs are little Houdinis, and if there's any kind of a gap, especially with the height of the water that's going to be in this tank, they're going to find their way out. And I know for a fact there's a couple people in this office who are not going to be thrilled with having a little frog hopping around, so it needs to fit nice and snugly. So what I've done here is I cut a template for the top, and I'm going to use it at this point just for the thickness. What I'm going to do is set it up so that the black trim that you see that's going on the top here is going to be even with the top of well, the future lid. The lid that's actually going to go on this is going to only cover the larger chamber. The smaller one to the right is going to be nice and open. That way I make sure I get lots of good gas exchange. It's funny the things that go through your head when you're narrating videos like this. As I said, I recorded this material not quite a year ago, but it was only been, I think, about maybe 6 months since I actually started making videos altogether. And I was watching this and said, wow, this workstation used to look nice and clean. Since then, I have done a lot of work on it, and it's all dinged and banged. I've written on it and drilled holes in it, and I think it might be time for me to replace it. It's just a 3/4 inch piece of plywood I set on top of a plastic table, so it's easy to change over. So here we are nearing the end of this video now. I just need to cut a screen to keep the gravel from falling through the egg crate, and then set it all up. The funny thing is, when I was doing the setup for this is the smallest. Oh, there's the lid, by the way. I've actually got it cut with a thumb hole and everything now. The last aquarium I set up, I think before this, was I think it was 13 feet long, and you can actually climb inside it when you're doing things. So this is really quite tiny, and I had a hard time with it because I wanted to put a plant in it, and I wanted to put at least one, or a few rocks, or a rock as it turns out, and some shells. But you can't put too much in because well, the frogs would hide and you'd never see them. So it had to be kind of well, Spartan really more than anything else. I ended up going with the Java fern for the plant, and I thought I'd picked out a small one, but apparently it wasn't small enough, so I had to break it in half. And that's going to be my plant. Here's my rock. I'm going to throw a couple shells in, and that's pretty much all I can do if you're ever going to see these frogs. And of course, that's the whole purpose of setting this up in the first place, is so the kids can actually see the frogs. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this. If you like it, please like and or subscribe, and leave comments on what you think about it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave you off with it all set up. As I said, I wanted to leave this in the shop for, well, pretty much through the entire cycling process. I wanted to make sure it's all nice and stable, feed them, make sure the frogs are happy, thriving, there aren't any hiccups with it. And they did really well. They're still living to this day. Actually, that plant looks a lot bigger now. If I remember, I'll try and take a picture of the actual, what it looks like now, and just give you an update on it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.